Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Bourbon Pursuit, the official podcast of bourbon. Kenny Coleman here.
Ryan Cecil here.
I'm Fred Minnick.
Dear God, guys, it's like how many times have we done this and we can't even have a good.
Well,
I
didn't
don't
if
know.
Fred was
I
going
mean-
first or if I'm going first. So
Don't we
honestly-
have a pecking order?
Our leader was gone. We didn't know what to do. Like you even told us to talk. We didn't even know how to talk.
It's true. It was like I said,
We
guys, I
really
need you to
got-
be busy for like the first 10 or 15 minutes. I'll come in a little bit later, and it was like crickets. And you guys fell into the typical trap of like a bunch of dads in a cul-de-sac, and you just started like talking about sports. You're like,
it's water
oh,
cooler
how about
talk.
the Bills this year?
You know what?
I don't.
You know what the problem is? I didn't have a bourbon in my glass. Let me see if I can fix that.
Well,
Oh,
Kenny won't
man.
do water cooler talk with me, so I'm not used to it. He's
Yeah,
just
okay,
got
there
his
we go.
Headphones all day.
Well, somebody's got to get the business done around here.
That's
That's
true.
how things work. Well, we got I'd say we have a jam-packed show, but we got one particular topic to talk about. But before we do that, let's go ahead and introduce the rest of the folks here on the roundtable. So we'll go ahead and start with the guy that's in our top right. I'm gonna go ahead and bump him out of the way. Now he's bottom left. Blake, go ahead. You guys are gonna make my job really easy when it comes to like post-production. I mean, dear Lord. Blake, you're on mute, man.
You just want to start over, dude? Like completely.
Okay, that was an auto mute. That's not on me. You automatically muted me.
I didn't touch
A
anything.
lot of great. All right.
Maybe just my trigger finger because I know what to expect out of you all now.
I'm Blake from Sealbox. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that was it. We waited all that time. Oh man, alive. I expected more. All right, let's
Nailed
keep
it.
going here. Yeah,
I
you
gave
nailed
a
it. That was
clap.
great.
I cleared it. Yeah.
All right, Brian.
All right, this is Brian of Sippin' Corn Bourbon Justice on the very first Bourbon Community Roundtable as we work out the glitches.
Yeah, haven't had enough time, right? And Jordan.
Hey, this is Jordan from BreakingBourbon.com. Excited to be here once again, fellas.
And let's also not forget this is kind of a celebratory moment. Not only is this BCR number 103, but this is episode number 500 of Bourbon Pursuit. So there we go. Another round of
dang.
applause
Oh, no
for all
shit.
of us. We've done well, fellas.
Milestones left and right.
We didn't
Yes,
want to
we
do
are.
another live one, like in
Do it
person.
Are we ready to settle down? No, I don't know if I can handle you all with just like throw me for all these curveballs everywhere. So I can only handle you once a month via a live stream.
Fair enough.
So this is a topic that I didn't want to do, did not even want to touch on it. And I had put it in our X chat, our DM chat, our Twitter chat, whatever it's going to be. It's the chat that we've been talking to in the past 10 years together, or however long it's been through that particular medium. I don't even really post anything on that platform anymore, but we still check it just for the DMs between us. Even though it's really weird, we all have each other's cell phone numbers. We could certainly take this to a text message thread, but we continue to use X. And I said, well, what topics can we talk about that are not tariff related? Because we had somebody that commented when Ryan and I did a This Week in Bourbon, we talked about tariffs. And me and Ryan, I felt like we played both sides of the fence. We did great. It was probably one of the most least political discussions we've ever had. Actually, we don't really get much political on the air, but I felt like we played like very good, even sides here. And of course, we get one hate comment that says, stick to bourbon, whatever. And so I've always been one of these things of like, I don't want to get into it. And obviously, the news of the past 24 hours has kind of led us to this point of talking about tariffs because Trump has, well, this has been a crazy, maybe even before we started this, is that Trump had said, hey, we are going to go ahead and enact 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. We're going to go ahead and do retaliatory tariffs. Ontario basically said, clear out every single piece of American whiskey and American spirits off the shelf, buy Canadian only. And within mere hours of starting this recording, Mexico and Canada have both said, all right, let's hold the phone here. Let's go ahead and give ourselves a 30-day extension on this. So we were talking about doing that. And then I got an email today from a congressman, Congressman Morgan McGarvey, and wanting to actually come on the show to talk about tariffs because he is very much he's from Kentucky and very much wants to lobby in favor of everything of bourbon, and was going to have him on here tonight, but in an effort to make sure that things didn't go off the rails, I recorded something with him earlier to make sure that we can all sit here and listen to it and we can talk about it afterwards. So everybody ready for 12 minutes of fun with me and Congressman McGarvey? Congressman Morgan McGarvey. Everybody today. Can anybody hear that, by the way?
We
Just give me a little
can.
thumbs up.
You asking about
Can
the
you?
chat?
Got the audio.
The audio on this video I'm getting ready to play. Could everybody hear that for a quick
Yeah.
second?
I heard
All
it.
right. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and play this. It's 12 minutes long. It's super good, I'll say. But we'll let you hear it, and then from there, we'll take it. So, talk to you all in a few minutes. Put yourself on chat. I'll see you in a few. Or sorry, put yourself on mute, not chat. Today on the show, I am joined by Congressman Morgan McGarvey. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. You know, this has been one thing where tariffs have been looming over the bourbon industry now for quite some time, ever since President Trump was talking about coming to office. And we kind of thought this was coming because of the last time he was in office. We were also in the same exact predicament. And now here we are again a couple years later. Now, as of the most recent news is that all the tariffs have been suspended for another month. Going from Canada and to Mexico. First question for you real quick is sort of what do you feel like is the end game that President Trump is trying to get at with these tariffs? And I understand why alcohol and U.S. alcohol is kind of in the mix of this. And of course, Kentucky bourbon plays a part of it. But really, what's his end game? What's he trying to accomplish with creating these tariffs?
It's a great question because we saw him campaign on tariffs. We saw him do tariffs when he was president the first time. Those really broad tariffs don't have the strategy that a typical tariff has, right? So if you do a tariff to say, hey, we're going to tariff steel because we want to grow the American steel industry, that there's some more strategy involved with that. These tariffs seem to be far more broad. They seem to be a little bit more targeted at other policy goals, and we have to see how well that works for him. In the meantime, we know how it impacts the bourbon industry here at home, and I think that's why we pay so much attention to it in Kentucky.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we had talked. I think you were saying this is how much billions of industry in the state of Kentucky is bourbon business?
Yeah, the bourbon industry is billions of dollars, and I think important to what we're talking about right now, Canada is actually the largest export partner for Kentucky. And so that makes it a little more interesting this time around as well.
Yeah, and to kind of play devil's advocate, I know because I'm in all the groups and the forums, and there's some short-sighted views of this where people say, "Oh, great, well that means more bourbon for me here in America." I don't think they understand this is a global economy that we also try to reach with, and other people also say, "Well, the entire population of Canada is less than the state of California, so why does it matter?" Kind of give your thoughts and your opinions on that too.
Yeah, first of all, let me tell you, if I thought there was going to be a lot more really good bourbon on the shelves for us here in America, I would be a little more conflicted in this position.
Because you're a bourbon consumer, like you love the stuff after all too.
I love bourbon. I'm a true bourbon fan, and so yeah, I would have a little conflict of interest with that. That's not really what's going on, and so I think it's important to look at this in the global context and not just within the bourbon context itself. So we'll talk about bourbon, and I think then zoom out a little bit as the spirits industry as a whole. Canada, what they're talking about right now, not just with the tariffs, but with actually pulling American whiskey off of the shelves in Ontario and British Columbia. I talked to a local bourbon company here in town who said that would impact them $40 to $50 million a year in Ontario alone. So these will have an impact. We also don't think it's going to stop here. The tariff talk is bigger than just Canada and Mexico. This is the first round. So I think you're seeing us prepare for a little bigger fight. Now let's talk about the spirits industry as a whole. so many of our bourbon companies own other spirits. And whether it's American whiskey, right? So Jack Daniel's not a bourbon, but is an American whiskey, is part of a bourbon company. That impacts the bottom line there too. So many of our spirits companies also have tequila. And I'm a bourbon connoisseur. I'm actually not a tequila connoisseur. That goes back, yeah, I haven't really been able to drink tequila since college. Everybody has that drink. That's mine. So what happens over the tariff is, to be a tequila, if you're 100% agave tequila, you have to be bottled and made in Mexico. You can't make tequila in Louisville. Therefore, those tariffs are adding costs to all of our spirits companies that bring tequila in and also make money off of those spirits. And again, back to what tariffs are. A lot of what tariffs are supposed to do is encourage industry here in America. They are going to add cost to whatever you're putting a tariff on. But maybe there can be a balancing impact if it's helping the American economy. But when you're talking about like bourbon and tequila, you can't make bourbon anywhere else. So the bourbon that's exported here, right, it is American made. That's where it is. It hurts American companies and American consumers. If you're talking about something like tequila, you can't make it here. It has to be made in Mexico. Those tariffs are going to increase the cost for American consumers as well.
And so the other big thing about everything in bourbon as well, kind of talk about the impact with jobs and everything like that. Obviously, it's very easy to see that the impact here will, with a $40-50 million loss. I mean, this is the way that we've always positioned it, is that now that those sales can't happen internationally, well, they've got to raise the prices here internally, and it's going to get passed off to the consumer. If they can't sell that, they can't make their numbers. Therefore, people are going to lose jobs. I mean, tell me if there's something that I'm missing in that circle.
No, that's the basic calculation. And I think these bourbon companies, spirits companies, if you will, they have a choice. They can pass the cost off to the consumer, which maybe consumers don't buy as much. Maybe that impacts sales. Maybe that impacts jobs. They could also not pass the cost off to the consumer. But what does that impact? How much are they making? Are they expanding? Are they doing some of the really cool things that we see in our state? So, it's not that you go buy a bottle of Four Roses or Evan Williams or Woodford Reserve, but the bourbonism here that's expanding with the distilleries and the visitor centers and the tours and all the stuff they're doing. Maybe that's not happening, which impacts Kentucky and Kentucky jobs. Either way, there is a negative economic impact to our bourbon industry. And when that gets big enough, like what we saw in the first round of tariffs when Trump was president, then that's when you see it affect everybody, from the people who grow the corn that goes into bourbon, the coopers who put it in the barrel, the truck drivers who take the product to the store.
So I guess the flip side of this is, now that you have said this is, do you think is the start of much more? We had somebody in our community that is from the Nordic regions, and they said, I really hope we are not going to see this again with the European tariffs again. Do you foresee that happening here in the future as well?
I hope not. But it is a campaign promise. It's something they've done before. It is a logical next step. And there will be a negative impact to the bourbon industry. That's not a partisan statement. I have people say like, oh, don't be political. That's not a political statement. We know that the retaliatory tariffs on the bourbon industry are real. They've happened before. They're happening now in round 2 of the tariffs. And if there are further tariffs, nearly everyone expects that to happen again.
Got it. Well, I mean, it is unfortunate. I guess from those remarks as well, have you seen it, like, from the Kentucky side of things? I mean, obviously, you're here, Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, they all are advocates of the bourbon industry. Are you all kind of together as a unified force when you're trying to figure out a way to save bourbon from all this?
Yeah, the Kentucky delegation is small. We all know each other. We actually get along. And on this particular issue, I think you see some alliances. I can't speak for everybody in the delegation, but I know that Senator McConnell and Senator Paul, we've talked with both of their offices. They are opposed to these most recent tariffs because, in part, of the impact it's going to have on Kentucky.
So the other side of this is not only just from international, from both sides of the fence. Where do you see as a kind of a way to move forward here, and what do you think is ultimately going to happen, and what are you all trying to do to stop this as well? Is there something that we can do as as everyday Americans to help sign a petition, or what's the next phase of what's going to happen here?
Yeah, I think outlining the stories of the impact this has on our community is really important. Behind every paycheck is a family. Behind the money we're bringing into the bourbon industry are real jobs, real people for America's spirit. Bourbon is the only federally regulated spirit. It has to be made in America. And of course, 95% of the world's bourbon is made here in Kentucky. Big impact on us. I know Rand Paul is also introducing a bill on tariffs. I've not seen the actual text of the bill yet, but I think there'll be some legislative efforts underway as well.
Very good. And then kind of to end this, is there any kind of like closing thoughts or anything like that you'd want to sort of leave people with on both sides of this, to kind of say, this is what we're trying to do. This is how we're trying to help people on both sides of the fence, because we're trying to essentially save money to everyone here. As we had mentioned, if you are going to enact tariffs, and this is, we've talked about all the time, because we have our own bourbon company. Our glass comes from Mexico. Even the PVC seals that we get come from Canada. This is a very global economy. That's what the drinks business really is. What are kind of some closing remarks that you want to leave some folks with here?
Hey, look, I think you find some people who are either anti-tariff or pro-tariff. That's fine. But I think you should look at this more on a case-by-case basis. And the problem with these most recent round of tariffs is just how broad and how seemingly lacking an economic strategy they were. So what is the economic point of this? What is the economic benefit to America of these broad tariffs, particularly on an ally like Canada? And the answer, if you find what the economic benefit is to America, we'd really love to know, because we've talked with so many of our industries, not just bourbon, our automotive industry, several other industries here in town are going to be really negatively impacted by this without a seeming benefit in the short or long term. And so I think you just have to look at these things, not be partisan about it. What is good for our community? What's good for our economy? How do we continue to grow the American economy? And when we talk about bourbon in particular, we've enjoyed a lot of growth. Bourbon is cool. I'm in Washington. People say I'm from Kentucky. They immediately ask me, what's my favorite bourbon? Let's keep the bourbon industry growing and not put these negative impacts on it through really broad tariffs.
No, I'm glad to see that you're one of the most popular people in Washington when it comes down to that as well.
The bourbon is really popular. I'm just the beneficiary.
There you go. Well, Congressman McGarvey, I want to say thank you again for coming on the show, giving us a little bit of insight into this and what you all are doing. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks so much.
Wait a second. Jack Daniels isn't bourbon?
That's hilarious that you lead with that. That's hilarious.
Give me our mute.
There we go. Oh, sorry about that. So that's what you received out of that. I'm glad to hear that.
I really wish I knew that you were going to record with him prior, or I wouldn't have done 8 hours of research today on tariffs. So, no.
Well, I would have been more than happy to do it, but there was some other qualms in this group that said we should probably play it safe and not have him on this. But
I will say it wasn't qualms from the group. It was from me. I was protecting you, Ryan. I didn't even have
me specifically.
Yes, and myself, because I know us, and I can just see. I didn't even have to like look down at you very often. I could see you seething with certain things. Like I could just feel you I could feel your presence on the interwebs wanting to say something in that interview. But Kenny, you did a great job, man.
Yeah, you did.
That was great. You kept it all about the tariffs, and you tried to keep it on to bourbon specifically. So I want to say cheers to you, brother, for doing that. And that was a big interview for you. So good job.
It was
Not a problem.
great. I mean, the follow-up questions too. I mean, you were
Yeah.
nailing it.
Yeah, you
You
really
were
did.
great.
Good job.
This is my tryout for Fox News, everybody. Just letting you know.
I was thinking you more of a CNN guy, but yeah.
Well, I say that only because I'm just poking fun. But honestly, thank you all. But let's kind of shift the discussion and talk about this a little bit, and some of the responses he has. Honestly, the biggest one that I found the most surprising was that he doesn't think this is the end of it, where he thinks that this is going to be yet another chip where Kentucky is going to have to be played when it comes to more international trade, when it comes to potentially the European Union and elsewhere. I kind of want to get your all's thoughts on that one.
Boy, I tell you what, when it happened last time, Kentucky, the domestic growth was so strong, it could withstand it, right? And it was an opportunity for these brands to say, you know what, Poland's not working out anyway. Let's go to South Dakota, and so they did that. But nobody ever foresaw Canada withdrawing, which I'll get into the historical stuff on this later, but there is precedent for this, especially from Canada. But nobody foresaw this, the withdrawal claims. And, the thing that's different now than 2017, 2018, the domestic growth is gone. Gen Z's not coming over at the depth that the millennials were for Buffalo Trace or Jim Beam or whatever. It's just not happening. So there's not a cushion here. They're already cutting into bone with recent layoffs and cooperage closures. So all this does is it throws fear into an industry that has to forecast 6 years out for their product. But everybody is trying to figure out India. Everyone's trying to figure out China. I think that the distilleries, I think a lot of this stuff with Canada will get them to double down on some of their more Eastern strategies when it comes to international growth. I know that's what Brown-Forman's doing in a big way with Indian bartenders, but European Union, UK, they hold the cards to what is next, right? So if they come after bourbon again, I don't know how many people have. I don't know how many brands have put their growth focus on those specific areas. I think a lot of them have pulled out, with the exception of like the UK. I think a lot of them have pulled out of like their European efforts in comparison to what they think are stronger growth markets. So Canada cuts deep. That to me, Canada's a much bigger hurt than European Union or UK even. So to me, there could be other tariffs coming, but there could be nothing at all that could touch the power of Canada withdrawing, not just putting on tariffs, but withdrawing the spirit entirely from their shelves. I mean, that can hurt.
Well, I mean, I know they said that, but it's like, okay, who's going to buy all that product that they're pulling off? Is the government going to buy it back? Like, they're going to use taxpayer money to do it? Like,
Man, I don't
that's
think
a lot
you got
inventory that you got to like.
it may be, Ryan, but they're just going to hold it, and also they've done it before. In the 1980s, they started this ethyl carbamate testing, and they basically Canada helped change the world policy on something that's not even fully considered a carcinogen. And if it was a carcinogen, it's a class 2 carcinogen. Jim Beam and like 2 other products tested over that, and they withdrew all the Jim Beam product in the country, and they shortly, they just did that, and then shortly thereafter, Jim Beam got their levels down, their EC levels down to where they could be in Canada. But I don't think when it comes to trade wars, Canada has always been very tough on America. This goes back, and when it comes to whiskey's always right there in the middle of it. There was a whole fight over whether or not that Canadians could use bottled and bond, and they decided to tariff us on our lumber in the 1930s. There was fights over blended whiskey coming into the States. Canadians have always been very aggressive with us when it comes to whiskey. When we have trade fights, they always attack whiskey. This is probably the fourth or fifth time that I can think of that Canadians have done this. So they know where to hit, but I think they're also stupid to do this because you want to get every Trump voter in this country to boycott Crown Royal. Yeah, that could happen because those are your Crown Royal drinkers. A lot of Trump voters are Crown Royal drinkers. A lot of Republicans are Crown Royal drinkers. And they will boycott. They'll move over to Jack Daniels, So if we're going to, that's the other side of this coin that hasn't really been talked about a lot. And, I don't think Canada may be reassessing what they said and how they're doing it, but I think they're serious.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I couldn't find a good number on it. Like, what is the actual number of bourbon exports versus Canadian whiskey exports to the U.S.? And like you said, Fred, I think, Crown Royal is much more, vulnerable to these than bourbon is per se. Like, you look at a company like Diageo that I think, 40% of their portfolio is tequila and Canadian whiskey, if I was looking at it right, but that could be wrong. But it's a big portion of their portfolio, and that's like, obviously, I don't want bourbon. The tariff thing, I know y'all are trying to protect. I'm not like a huge fan of it. I think it's silly, and I don't know what, like, that was a great question, Kenny, about what is the ultimate outcome of this. I have no idea, and nobody knows, and that's what's kind of weird about it. I mean, they say it's national security and fentanyl on the border, which I understand. I mean, fentanyl is hit. I've had 3 people I know directly that have been killed by fentanyl usage, but it's it is like, I'm trying to understand that end game of what this is, and it's like, okay, that's where I can't wrap my head around it all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So-
I'm not an economist, and that was one of the
Yeah.
things I said. It's like,
Yeah.
listen, I don't even know why we're doing this, but entertain me. That's kind of what I said. So I'm right there with you. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, first of all, everyone probably listening, no matter their political viewpoints, who they voted for, et cetera, I think they all have, especially listening to a bourbon, related podcast, they'll have bourbon top of mind, and they want to make sure the bourbon industry is okay. So if you take aside the politics, you take aside what country hurts the other more or worse, right? And you just focus on what does this mean to just the overall industry and how it could change the future trajectory of it. So if you look at what Fred said, domestically, things are slowing down. So if we go to a trade war with Canada, if that picks back up after its pause state, or whatever countries end up enacting it, right? Especially if it's major markets for bourbon. Sure, they have a lot of stock to start with. Yeah, they're holding on to it, but it stops future stock from flowing over. So that all of a sudden starts changing plans specifically for the largest bourbon manufacturers, right? You think of Brown-Forman with Jack Daniels. You think of Jim Beam with Jim Beam, 2 of the world's best-selling whiskeys. So they start having layoffs here, or more typically, they start having furloughs, and they start really slowing down production and maybe even slowing down some of the consumer experiences that they have on plan to build out here in Kentucky. And then it's like a trickle-down effect. So then you have less people maybe traveling to Kentucky, or they're not as excited and they're looking for an opportunity to try something new, and now they have it. So then you have like all the craft distilleries and all the small brands along the Kentucky Bourbon Trail who now they're totally being left behind because no one's coming to visit Kentucky, or it's slowing down and they're not being visited. And then you also have like the local, like I'm here in Pittsburgh, you have your local whiskey distilleries, and they're probably doing okay, but their opportunity to expand just closed up shop because now you know, everywhere is hurting now. They're not really pushing outside their own hometown. And that might be okay if that's what they're after, or if they're trying to grow and survive and they just need a revenue stream, that might really hurt them too. So there's really like a lose-lose situation here when it comes to not what country loses, but just what industry and what worker loses. And that's folks here in America. And that's going to be folks here in Kentucky too. And just a crappy situation all around, right? And I think everyone can probably agree on that one. It's not a let's try and dig in and see what country we can hurt more. It just blows overall for just the bourbon industry and the future trajectory of an industry that we all love and a spirit that we all love too. Right? Because it just takes a few slips and a few steps, and all of a sudden we're like, yeah, we still love bourbon, but you know what? All those people that we're getting excited about to bring in and like try the spirit and stuff like that, they're like, nah, that's okay. I'm gonna go try something else. Maybe another spirit, maybe a non-spirit. Who knows? But that excitement's gone, and that just stinks. Because one of the things I love doing is I love getting people who don't drink bourbon to try it and like talk about the spirit and things like that, or talk about it with other folks. Like if that excitement dies down and goes away, that's not going to be that great for any of us.
I want to be careful and make sure, because politicians do this all the time, and it's like it's always a zero-sum game. You know, like it's always like if this happens, then the world's going to end, and if this happens, the world's going to end, and so I just want to make sure like we have no idea. I predict that the Canadian and Mexican tariff they'll come to an agreement because I think it is bad for both countries involved, and I do worry about the European tariff a little bit, but at the same time, I think like Fred mentioned, bourbon brands have figured out Europeans really aren't that interested in bourbon, and we got to go somewhere else. And like you said, India, China, Asia. I don't know. It's a confusing time for sure, and that's what sucks is all the uncertainty because as you all mentioned, you know, you got to predict 6 years out, and I just hope it both sides can come to an agreement and like let's just move on and keep growing the category.
Yeah, I might be naive on this. Yeah, go ahead, Blake. I'm going to defer you.
Okay. I think what's interesting on this one compared to the previous 2016, 2017 is I think Fred hit on it, but basically just saying like we're in a different spot than we were back then. You know, the domestic growth was. I mean, we even talked about it on here. Everybody's like, "Oh man, maybe I'll get Pappy here. Maybe I'll get Blanton's here now," and that's not where we are. I think it is interesting, just because this one will hurt the bigger guys way more than I think a lot of the smaller guys. You know, having to do some extra costs. If you're a high price bottle, it's not great. You can make it through, but you know, for the Brown Foremans who are just pumping out Jack Daniels across the world and you know, a lot of these tequila producers and like we said, Crown Royal, I think that's going to put them in a really tough spot. You know, they're not working off of real cushy margins on a lot of those products. So to add this in there, it'll be interesting. But you know, it's hard to look back at this from our perspective and say, oh man, they should do this or that because that would change things. But we know what hits us. I mean, I've talked to 3 or 4 brands that we work with on Seal Box directly affected by this. You know, somebody's trying to bring tequila out of Mexico. They were trying to get it done before the 31st, before the tariff hit. I know Proof and Wood, who a lot of you know, Dave Schmier, they do a lot with Canadian whiskey. They also export a lot, like hits them really hard. So we see it from that perspective, but you know, it's really hard to say because we're only seeing the bad parts of it right now. I don't think it helps grow bourbon. I think we have all the bourbon we need here domestically, and I'd love to see it grow in other countries and everything. And it's turning into not just like, oh, well, 25% to you, and now we're going to retaliate with that. It's no, we're going to clear the shelves of your product, and each one trying to double down on the latest threat. So it, in general, if you're a business trying to deal in these settings, it's just a lot of uncertainty. It makes it hard to maneuver. But yeah, we'll see. Who knows? Maybe we just have all kind. Maybe that bourbon glut hits a little earlier now because nobody's going to export it out to different countries. But there's worse problems to have.
I mean, it's
I
a
want to
pretty big
say
problem.
too. Yeah,
I mean, just to kind of echo on what Blake had said, just because we've talked about it plenty of times on the show. It's like if these big drinks companies can't sell internationally, and we've already seen it just because of the excess stocks that they have. They're going to start creating more product lines, which are going to start creating more SKUs on the shelf, which is going to go ahead and start pushing out other players inside the game. You've already seen this with Four Roses. You've seen this now. I mean, I'm going to guess that Woodford Double Oak was already way in the thought process here before then. I just foresee more brands, these larger brands that have these excess stocks. They have the cachet of saying, well, this is coming from Buffalo Trace. This is coming from Four Roses, and it's just in another label. Therefore, people are automatically have this this gravitational pull to them, and they're going to be less inclined to go try any other bourbons on the shelf. So, I more bourbon in
saw
America
that-
is not a good thing.
You saw that
Which
happen.
leads into our next
with
topic,
Eagle Rare, 12 year.
12 year. Is
No.
Exactly.
You weren't supposed to say that.
You can't say 12 year.
I can't
You know
say
what's interesting about all this? This is a topic we bring up a lot, and that is that the platforms to sell alcohol to consumers is also better than it was in 2017. And so I forgot who said it here, but someone said that they think it would hit the bigger brands better, and it'll hit the bigger brands harder than the smaller ones. Like last time, these restrictions, these tariffs, and I think that the smaller brands that are selling on Sealbox and places like that, they have found their customer online. They have created methods legally to sell products, whereas they could not 10 years ago. And they've been, what's the word for it? Kind of guerrilla marketing and grassroots selling, hand-to-hand bottle selling, everything that they've done. Whereas the larger ones have still depended on the old school 3-tier system and the exports and everything. And I really do think that all the efforts that the smaller brands have put into digital marketing and to digital sales, and to doing, working their butts off for selling every single bottle in their gift shop, I think that saves them. That keeps them from getting hurt from a lot of what's going to happen in the next 6 months.
Yeah, but that's still not easy. I mean,
No, it's not.
can't
None of
fool.
this shit is easy. This is,
no,
I would
no,
say,
it's not.
I would argue that this is probably the hardest business to be in. I've watched people, I've seen you two like risk your livelihoods and everything. And, and you're just now coming up for air, I feel like, and you're still drowning.
We're still drowning. Yeah, we just got our nostrils are just a little bit above sea level here.
We got a straw above the water.
I mean, but my point to that is that the smaller distillers who have survived the last 2 years, they've been surviving up against Jack Daniels this whole time, and they're scrappy. They know how to do this. These larger distillers that have they have someone in a boardroom that says we need to save this amount of money, so we got to lay off X amount of people. No one ever says, well, let's give up our bonuses or let's all take a pay cut. No one at that level ever does that. And what large publicly traded company do the CEOs take pay cuts? Do the board members take pay cuts? No, it goes down to the workers, and I will say this, the congressman, he hit me right here in the heart when he's talking about, families being affected. I've been saying that every time someone wants the bourbon bubble to bust, so there are real families tied into all this, including us, where a lot of us are in the cottage industry side of like events or books or whatever, but we're all impacted.
So the thing that I keep thinking of is the word bluff. I mean, we're all worried about this. Everyone's in a dither about it. And, at the 11th hour today, we, get first a 1-day reprieve, and then it's a 30-day. I mean, it's all this big game that we're just a pawn in. But I really do think it's a lot of bluffing, because things in the short term will be uncertain, and that's bad for the market, and that's bad for families, that's bad for employers, it's bad for brands, all that stuff. But bourbon is powerful. There are going to be people worldwide that are demanding it, and the politicians know it. And the big brands, the Centauri, the Diageos, the Brown Forman with Jack Daniels, they already exported a shit ton of their product to all the different countries where there might be retaliatory tariffs. They've got their product out. They're poised. They're ready to go. They're looking at Michigan and Minnesota and North Dakota for expanding domestic markets. So they've got their plan B on that. And I agree with what a lot of you all are saying, that, you know, the niche craft brands, they've got their audience here, and the big brands are too big of a ship to steer into that. So, I mean, I'm seeing some promise through this. It's going to freak everybody out for about 30 days, and we're going to be all right. And I'm knocking on wood that I'm right about this, but you just, you know, there's just so much confusion and posturing and bluffing out there that we're just a pawn. We're a powerful industry. People love us. We're going to keep going all right.
Fingers crossed.
Peace out.
Peace out. Mic drop.
You know, I wanted to bring up
I
this
think there's
debate.
a lot of.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I think there's a lot of posturing going on, and you know, we can all go back and forth about whether the ends justify the means type of a deal. But real quick, who did everybody vote for? I didn't want to get too political. No, just kidding. Just wanting to see Kenny's face real quick when he told us to not get too political.
Yeah, I was about to say,
but
let's not make any heads explode.
But like, I wanted to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, thought you were done.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
I was curious as a debate question. It's like, what do you think will impact bourbon or alcohol more? You know, say the tariffs go through, putting a cancer label on alcohol, or the tariff. Like, what will actually affect sales more on that?
I think
see
the
this
comparison
go
would
down
be
to
cigarettes.
Yeah.
I don't think that hurt cigarettes or cigars at all. I think tariffs, but I still think tariffs are short term. The sentiment behind the caution, the labels, I think is stronger than all of it. And I've been saying it for years that these studies that have like one little fraction of evidence, and they combine them with other studies that have fractions of evidence, you know, those are more damaging when they're put in a collective, and a body, a medical body, is you know, makes a decision on alcohol, and they start giving, you know, recommendations as doctors and as public health institutes. But my whole thing, Ryan, is like, how many hundreds of years of data do we have on alcohol? We have
I don't think it's hundreds. I think it's centuries.
It's thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah, well,
The
I mean,
Sumerians were
centuries
drinking
would be
booze.
hundreds. Yeah, I mean, we got thousands of years of data on alcohol, and there are things that it causes, and there's one that we definitely do know: cirrhosis. Right? Why don't we put a cirrhosis warning label on there? Why not? Why not that? Why not like liver disease on there? Oh, why specifically cancer? You know, they would specifically want to put cancer because that's the buzzword, right? I mean, that will have an impact, and they genuinely don't want people drinking. And there are people who drink too much, and I'm not a doctor, but like, I talked to several doctors, like, moderation's the key. Moderation's the key. And how many people live to be 106 and say they have a whiskey every single day, right? They have a whiskey every day, and they have bacon. And if they're in Italy, they smoke. You know, it's so weird about that. It's so weird. Like, if you just take care of yourself, do things in moderation, you have a nice, healthy life. But we want to put people in panic modes, and for some reason, you know, the alcohol industry is being attacked by the health zealots, if you will.
I know. all these years, Fred, you've been saying it, and I kind of discounted you, and that not discounted, but I was like, it'll blow. It'll never come to anything. And then, by golly, you were right. So I'll trust you from now on.
Like one day, Four Roses will sell. They will.
One day,
they
Four
be
Roses
bought by
will
somebody,
sell.
right?
That's it. You've heard it here for the 92nd
it's-
time.
One day.
How many episodes? Yeah.
Actually, the final episode, or the final, the final chapter of my book, Bourbon, Rice, Fall, and Rebirth, I basically talked about the scenario now where tariffs and health are the biggest like concerns for the alcohol industry. Like and they're both playing out 2025. It's kind of freaky, actually.
I do. If somebody could I just want to understand how much Canadians drink bourbon, and how, as part of a whole of the industry, like what percentage of sales that is, and like what is the actual economic impact. Because like I fear that they're saying it's going to close everything, this and that, and it's like a zero-sum game. Like, I understand it's going to have an impact, no doubt, 100%. But I'm just curious if it's like, is it 10%? Is it 2%? Is it 1%? Like, how impactful is it? And I understand 1% is a lot for these big companies. But, it's like, I fear that they're using bourbon as like a political pawn. And you kind of saw this with, when Biden got elected and he closed the Keystone Pipeline. Republicans were like, oh, gas prices are high because, the the pipeline got shut down, and then everything's going to shit because of that. And it's more nuanced than that, I guess. And I just don't want bourbon to be like this, like pawn, I guess, political pawn and whatnot.
Well, Brian just put it on the chat here.
Yeah.
So in 2023, Canada was ranked as the second largest export market for American spirits and exports, and it reached around 255 million. And that, again, was according to a study done by Discus. So second largest export market, I would say, is still a pretty big percentage.
That's spirits, though, not.
Yeah.
So I would love to see the breakdown, but I'm sure whiskey is a large part of it, but that's still spirits too.
I would agree. I think you can get gin almost anywhere, but people are searching for American whiskey and bourbon.
I agree. Just pointing that out.
Yeah, okay. All right. That's fine.
Who's
you can
freaking
play
out
devil's
is probably Found North, because they're like, all their stuff might be going, if that goes into, with Canadian whiskey and whatnot. So, and they have a great product.
I just dropped that study in the chat, boys.
Okay, cool.
Go and look at it.
Thank you much.
Yeah, well, the other thing, there's probably barrels of Canadian whiskey sitting somewhere here in the U.S., so it might not have to get to that point for a little bit, but it's always a concern on the horizon.
I was gonna say I've seen some inventory
Yeah.
sheets. I think they can find enough domestically for a while.
Yeah, I remember seeing some of the like 24-year-old at barrel or something.
76 million worth.
So
Which is significant.
Yeah.
You had
Slightly.
you had asked the question, like, how does the consumer feel about it, Ryan? I would say they're kind of feeling, they have been pretty, and this is coming from some posts I've seen. Like, I would say the leader of the Canadian whiskey world is Davin Corgamo, incredible whiskey taster and author. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. Brian, you were on we did a whole author roundtable book thing at the Brandy Distillery downtown, Copper and Kings, a few years ago. And I think you met him, but he basically said it's time for us to drink Canadian rye. And he's like, say goodbye to Jim Beam and all that, and bourbon. And he did it in a polite way. But don't forget, like, our country has been, I don't know if it's joking or if they've been serious about it, but there's been a lot of back and forth about making Canada a state. So I think they've had some animosity toward us.
Which is offensive.
Yeah, I mean, the Canadians have had a lot of animosity toward us, to the point where they're booing our national anthem at hockey games. And so I think a lot of them are welcoming the opportunity to have like some kind of display against an American product as proud as bourbon. And so to answer that point of like, you don't get any deeper into whiskey than Davin DeCorgamo, and he's encouraging people to drink Canadian ryes.
National unity is a real thing, and that's hard to fight against.
100%.
We have another freedom fry situation about to happen on bourbon. Is that what we're gonna do?
Well, we don't have oh, what am I thinking of? Well, where they have the fries with all like the cheese and stuff on top of her in Canada. Poutine, yeah, we don't have a lot of
Poutine, yeah.
poutine here in
Love some
the
poutine.
US. Yeah, poutine's great. All right, fine. We'll start tariffing poutine. Does that sound good to you all?
Anyone?
By the way, if you look
Nope.
in if you look in that report, if you all look in that report I sent,
Yeah.
Canada is number 5 for American whiskey exports. So it's European Union 1, Australia 2, Japan 3, United Kingdom 4, and
Yep.
Canada 5. They are number 2 for distilled spirits overall.
So, does anyone like Canadian bacon more than our bacon?
I
mean,
Isn't it
what
just
it comes
onion?
down to.
That's probably
Right.
fighting words for a lot of folks.
I mean,
Brian.
come on. I mean, really?
Hey,
We do it
hey,
better.
listen, Canadian bacon's really good on like a McMuffin or something.
Well, there's a time and a place for it, but mostly
Yeah, that's where it fits real nicely.
yeah, because it's all round and stuff. But give me real bacon.
All right. Well, any other
Tim
kind of
Hortons
closing thoughts
is
when we're
nice.
sitting here thinking of tariffs and anything that you'd kind of want to leave folks with? I think we touched on a lot of it. Honestly, hats off to all of us. I don't think we got too political on either side. We stuck to what it is about bourbon. So hopefully that it didn't trigger anybody that's been listening to this the entire time. We definitely want to make sure that we are being conscious of our listeners and knowing that we really want to focus on bourbon, but this is definitely something that affects the industry. It affects us all personally that are sitting around here, and it should affect you as well. It's going to affect your pocket at some point. So knowing that this is a part of our
Yeah.
culture and a part of the bourbon culture as well.
Great way to put it.
Yeah. And
You're here.
politics
Yeah,
suck. So
I think that's a
what-
great way to
what
put
the-
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Politics just suck. They try to divide us and whatnot, and it's like that's the to sum it all up, it just all sucks. And it puts everybody against each other, and I was no more disgusted than just all day reading, just all the bantering back and forth of you're stupid, no you're stupid, or this or that, and it's like I don't know. We have to get past that and just like start working a way together. It's got to come back to that, and I don't know what that's going to take, and it's probably not likely in the next 3 to 4 years. But that's all I'll have to close on it. Everybody made great remarks, and I hope this doesn't affect bourbon because I love it. I love what it's done for the state, and our communities, families, and whatnot. And I just don't, like Brian put it best, we're pawns in the game. We have no control, and it's all just political clickbaity, like all this stuff to get us all riled up and fighting against each other. And I just don't want that to happen.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Master Blender.
Amen. Yeah.
Well, stick around with us. Next week, we'll be talking about Eagle Rare 12. Until then, let's go ahead and start signing off.
By the way, it used
but-
to be Weller Rye. That used to be that was the big one too back in the day.
Canadian route.
Well. Oh, that's good. That could have a hit on
Canadian
Fireball,
whiskey, right?
Yeah, Fireball's Canadian whiskey. So
See, it's
God,
going to hit
this is-
everybody.
this is a fucking shit show. Holy shit! It's gonna come down hard.
All right. I think we all need to take a nap after this one. Let's go ahead and do some sign-offs. Blake, I'll let you go down here first.
Blake from Sealbox. Obviously, always fun to be here. A little more of a serious tone tonight, but I felt like it was good. It was level-headed, and that's not what always gets you the splash in the news feed or whatever. But I feel like it was really a conversation, and hopefully it doesn't affect the bourbon industry. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to see a slowdown or problems for any brand or distiller or company, no matter how big or large or small they are. So, thanks for having us, and another good one.
For sure. And Brian.
Yeah, this is great. Appreciate it. Brian was sipping corn and bourbon justice on you know me on all the places. Look forward to the next one too, guys. Thanks.
As usual. And Jordan, Anchorman,
Hey,
round us out.
This is Jordan, one of the co-founders of BreakingBourbon.com. Really good discussion. I think it was nice just to have a civil discussion and not, as I saw a comment in the chat, make it us versus them. And go bourbon.
Go bourbon.
That's it. Just go
We're all
bourbon.
team bourbon over here.
We're
That's
all
for
team
sure.
bourbon in America.
New
That's
hashtag right there.
Yes.
And thank you to Mr.
All right.
Garvey for coming on. I can't remember his
Yes.
first name. What was it? Sorry.
Yes.
But,
Again, shout
was
out.
very
Thank you once
kinda-
again to Congressman Morgan McGarvey. It was great to have you on, share some insight, and glad to see that there's also help coming from both sides of the fence on the Bourbon Caucus to help move this in the right direction and make sure that we put a spotlight on the state, knowing that Kentucky is kind of in the middle of this. By the way, we totally forgot about it. You know that Kentucky peanut butter is also in this tariff war. If anybody didn't know that Jif peanut butter is the home is actually housed in Kentucky.
Just learned that
I
the
saw
other week.
somebody talked about that, and not many people know that the W.T. Young Library on University of Kentucky's campus is built off the peanut butter dynasty. So with that, let's go ahead and let's close this one out. But
The more you
cheers
know.
everybody for tuning in. I know I'm here with all kinds of just random tidbits of information for you. But make sure for tuning in. If you do like the show, want to support the show, follow us on all your socials, Instagram, TikTok, coming to YouTube even more soon. And if you also want to support the show, you like what you hear, you just want to help three guys try to make it in the bourbon business, go ahead, hit us on Patreon over patreon.com/bourbon pursuit. And maybe you can get yourself a nice little t-shirt and some bourbon bottle carrying bags over there too. But with that, cheers, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Toodles.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Vodka sucks.
Well
Glad that was
done,
over.
Kenny.
Glad
God
that was
almighty.
over. I've
Breath
been,
Man, you're going to
Good.
sleep well
I've-
tonight.
I have been like,
Although
fearing this
me-
one all goddamn day.
of
Me too. Were you worried
make
about me?
Canadian whiskey great again. That's pretty funny.
No. Right. You should. Fred called me earlier and he's like, I'm worried about Ryan. I think he's just going to go off on this guy. And I'm like, I don't think Ryan's that going to do that.
No way. Zero chance.
Listen, I might
That
have
was good.
also. I've gone off on people before on this show, and maybe I'm doing a little self-preservation there, but I do believe that Ryan had it. I think he had it in you for this one. So I'm just protecting my team member here. That's all I'm doing.
No.
I'm
It
not
was
Like I
good to
said,
have him.
This
You
worked
know,
out well.
I can't say, for any, I don't know if I'd vote for any congressman that would be a part of any podcast that I do. I think that's below them to come and join me drinking bourbon.
It's a good point.
I'll be honest.
He's got higher aspirations than just a member of Congress. I'll tell you that much.
It was
Yeah.
kind
Yeah,
of funny when we were
seems like
talking
super
about this,
smart
and
guy.
then I saw the email come through and he's like, "You want to come on the podcast?" And he said, "We'd love to come on the podcast and talk about it." I was like, "Well, we're doing a show tonight on tariffs if you want to join." So it was kind of like, wow, that's pretty random, but I guess that means something if we got Congress people reaching out to us wanting to come on the show and
Yeah, that's pretty
talk
cool.
about tariffs.
Pretty cool.
Man,
Pretty cool.
500 episodes later.
Well, I hate to.
Yeah, it's all.
I
it took
hate
was
to
500.
jump. Can I?
Yeah, let's
Kenny,
go
can
ahead.
I
Let's
just
end the
jump,
stream.
Or are
You're
you,
excused, Fred. You can go.
No. Let me go ahead and end the stream. Make sure we
I
get
think so. I
all
have
the
to
recordings
upload
done.
my-
But yeah, thank you everybody that tuned in tonight. We appreciate it, and we will see you in another month with another Bourbon Community Roundtable number 104. See you.
Sweet.
all.
Cheers.